What is going on, guys? My name is Demetri, and welcome to the Rise Productive Podcast. In today's episode, our guest is an engineer. He's a fellow content creator, and he's also from California, like many people in my previous episodes. I am excited to get into this podcast, so get ready for episode 11 of the Rise Productive Podcast. Hey, Drew, what's up?
Not much. How are you doing, Demetri?
I'm doing great. How's the weather where hopefully it's better than here?
Yeah, it's cool for here, but it's like, high 60s, so that's complaining about nothing.
Okay, that's actually pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
I was out for a run this morning. It was kind of dreary. When it gets to be the summer in the Midwest, I know you live in California. You're from Carolina. We talked before, always.
Right.
It's it's really hot, or it's not, or it's really rainy, or it's really snowy. There was like this 2-3 day span on multiple weekends in a row. I want to say 2-3 weeks ago, where it was like 75, and we were like, "What is this? What is that?" Yeah. So I'm a little jealous of your neck of the woods.
Yeah, that was North Carolina too. The old joke was it's like you get all 4 seasons in the same week.
Yeah.
Depending on the time of the year, and then the Midwest. My grandparents lived in St. Louis, so I know from going up there, it's like, how on earth in the summer is it warmer here than it is in North Carolina?
That's weird.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your life, your story. Everyone, I'm sure, wants to hear it.
Yeah, so my channel is Drew Rice Engineering Success. The reason is because I'm a system engineer. The reason is because I'm a system engineer and I work in the space program doing cost and risk analysis. I am really passionate about personal finance, and basically growing up, I grew up in a household with a father that was a pilot both in the Marine Corps and then commercial airlines, and a mom that was a software engineer. So from a young age, I had a really good insight into the aerospace industry, and that kind of grew that passion from a very young age, which both my parents went to the same college, and that was a very engineering-focused school. So I was very, very excited even in elementary school about knowing, oh, this is where I'm going to go to college. This is what I'm going to major in, and that gave a really good. That journey essentially is why I wanted to make a channel that's focused on both engineering and personal finance.
That's pretty cool. I was pointing down to tell them to look at your stuff in the description down below, not...
My apologies.
I
thought I was talking too loud.
No, you're good, man. You're good. I was just, as per usual, guys, check out Drew's stuff in the description/podcast notes down below. I usually do the plug. You did it yourself. That's funny.
No worries. Sorry.
So yeah, that's always pretty interesting. Whenever I know people who have had like their parents go to the same college, it ends up being that the child is like, well, I should probably go to said college, right? That's the move, I guess. That's what they want you to do. They may not overtly say it, but they probably, I don't know. Did they tell you like, hey, go to NC? Well, you went to where'd they go?
No, they never overtly told me, but it was kind of like you just grew up. Like we weren't like super fans and stuff. Like we weren't going to games and all that, but it was more of just a, you always would get like NC State shirts or hats or whatever growing up. And so it's, you kind of get quote unquote indoctrinated.
Yeah, it's like the little nudges that they kind of, Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And now with engineering, that definitely was something that was, or at least STEM was something that my parents heavily wanted us to do. But as, me and my siblings, but it wasn't ever a quote unquote requirement. And fortunately enough, I was interested enough in it. So,
well, I'm glad that you ended up going that route and that you like it, because sometimes I know there's a lot of kids who want to do certain areas and maybe their parents kind of nudge them in a certain way and then they don't like it. And I think this is a pretty good place to start, because this conversation is going to be mainly about, the college experience, kind of some of the issues that come from going to a 4-year university. I want to get into a topic that's about why essentially do you think people should go to community college? I think this will be a good little back and forth we can have here about that.
Yeah, for sure. So just so everyone knows, so I did end up going to NC State. I was actually pretty, I would say, obnoxious at the time when I was graduating high school, because I was so sure that that was where I was going to go. And I did really well in high school and knew that I could get in, and I literally only applied to NC State. And so then I went for chemical engineering because I was interested in biochem, and knew that engineering was a better option as far as like marketability in the job market. And so that's what I went for. And then about a year and a half into that, I realized, well, this is not what I want to do. And because I didn't go for the right reasons. I went thinking that I knew what it was, but I didn't actually have a goal in mind. And so then what happened was I came back home and went to the local community college and started loading trucks at UPS. And that way I was able to figure out what I wanted to do. I know it's like a classic thing of do something that you really don't enjoy. I know Casey Neistat is someone that definitely preached that. Is the best way to figure out what you want to do is to do something you absolutely don't want to do with a lot of time to think. And so that was very helpful. And then to answer your actual question is going to community college, it was a great choice because it gave me the time to focus on what I wanted, figuring out what I wanted to do, because I wasn't as worried about things like my, 4-year GPA, because what's really cool about community colleges, if you go and as long as you finish your associates, if you transfer in, then it becomes a little bit more muddy. But if you finish your associates at most, at least as far as I'm aware, public schools in the United States, when you transfer in, you will automatically be a junior you'll automatically be a junior, and your GPA will start over when you get to that school. So instead of having your like freshman year where all of us are adjusting and trying to figure out, what we're even supposed to be doing in college, among other things, you're only getting measured on those last 2 to 3 years, depending on, what degree you're getting, where you're already more focused, which was a huge help. And the other big advantage is, of course, money savings. I was actually looking after our conversation because I was trying to remember how much the difference is. Yeah, so the difference between NC State, just in-state, just tuition, nothing else, is about $4,500 a year. So when you look at it when you look at the community college, it's like $1,200 a semester. So you're looking at about $2,500 a year. So it's literally half the savings. So that was another big thing. I was fortunate enough because I was able to live back at home. So I wasn't, paying rent at the time. Able to work a job because the hours were more flexible since community college caters more towards commuters. And that way I was able to save a lot more money and, graduate without debt. So that was another huge reason that I think it's great for most people. And I think most people don't know what they want to do at 18 anyway, because we don't really have that much of a reference point outside of our parents.
Yeah, I know that's really true. I think for me, when I was going into college, I was thinking, I want to do something in the business world. And I knew that. And I ended up going for finance originally before I switched to marketing. And I think maybe the only reference point was like that my dad worked in finance. And I was like, well, I think I like what he does. I think, I wasn't really sure, honestly.
Right.
That was the only point of reference I had. And
right.
Also on top of that, I think something to touch on, regarding the GPA, when we were talking about this beforehand, I was thinking, maybe the GPA would be boosted because, you go to community college, generally you're going to get better grades. And I figured maybe if that transferred in, that'd help your GPA, but it doesn't. But I hadn't thought of, how much maturity you go through in those, even first 2 years of college. It's a different type of class setting. It's a different type of professor. It's a different type of workload. So I remember for me, my first years of college were very much figuring things out. My GPA, I think towards the end, was substantially higher than the beginning. And I didn't start at a low spot. It was like always in the threes. But it was a matter of like beginning, like 3.2, 3.4, and then towards the end, 3.8, 3.9. So it was like, well, if I just had my last couple of years of GPA and ended up doing a junior college in the beginning, I would have came out with I looked at it, it was like a 0.3 higher GPA. I was like, oh, well, but to me, it's like I'm a person who's like on not exactly a 4, but like, I don't know, 3.8 or something. It's like towards the end, that's what I got to. And I was like, that's probably what I am. But you go through those first couple of years, and I was told this by someone in high school. A teacher in high school. And I think it's a really good concept for like life and your personal growth, right? She said, think about yourself as growing in years of like 4-year phases. In high school, think about yourself freshman year to senior year. Wow, big difference. Think about yourself freshman year of college, senior year of college. Wow, I now being a senior, remembering myself freshman year, big difference. And then one more time after college before you probably should like settle down and the whole 9 yards with having a family and stuff, because 1 or 2 more cycles, she said, because you just, until you hit like 30, those 4-year cycles, you just change so much. So I think it's really important probably for people to do community college if they're not in a situation where they could get a bunch of money off from like a big academic scholarship or athletic scholarship, because it's money wise, personal wise, like you don't, the first couple years of college, like, is it fun? Kind of, yeah, sure, but like I don't know if it's worth the debt.
Right. No, for sure. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about parents and your desire to do, what you think they want you to do. I think it kind of goes in the same vein, because I think it's too common, especially when you look at people that just go to college because it's, quote unquote normal in that high school or, family that they grow up in. And they aren't really looking at it from the perspective of, the cost benefit of what is this going to get to me. And so I think that's the main thing, is making sure that people are, choosing what's best for them and not signing up for, more debt in a field where there's not as many job options.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think another big thing to touch on regarding like the maturity is when you are having those first 2 years of community college, you probably will have a better idea, or at least have more time to figure out what you maybe want to do, rather than if you go to a 4-year university and you don't know what you want to do, you pick something, then you switch. There's not an opportunity. There's a bad thing that happens for a lot of people where, they go for 4.5 years, or they end up going for 5 years because they just hard pivoted. They just really hard pivoted from like, I don't know, something in the business world to pre-med or vice versa. And that puts people in even more debt. And I know the amount of debt in America's college system with like all of our people who are graduating now. Do you know what the number is on that? But I
think it's 40,000 is the average. That's not student debt. I think 40,000 is the average personal debt that people have, at least
really?
as of 2018 or 2019. I can't remember what the study was, but yeah. CNBC I know did a thing on it. I
was thinking about the I think it's like 4 point something billion in student loan debt or something.
Yeah, it's
ridiculous.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
it's a ludicrous amount. And then the thing is, it's like the sad part is, especially growing up in like rural North Carolina, you see people that you go to high school with, and you have some people that grow up in more suburban, middle to upper middle class families that their families and they themselves prioritize going to college just to go to college. And they're not looking at it from the perspective of like, okay, well, I'm going to school for, pick something that has a average income in that area of say $60K a year. And they're not looking at it from the perspective where then you have people that are, say, go to 2 years and get a welding certificate at an associate's degree. They're going to make more, so with better job security. Now, of course, there's different goals as far as like what people want with work-life balance, and that's of course a consideration as well. But it's like, I just remember in high school that I would load trucks in the summertime because we'd go up and load hay bales, and that was like my summer job in high school. Nice. And so I was always around both extremes, and it was always funny to me the way that one would, kind of look down on the other, even though one is going to have way less debt and way more money as long as they're, responsible with lifestyle inflation.
Yeah, that's actually, the lifestyle inflation thing is a good point, because in America and in all across the world, that's got a pretty decent, financial foundation for where people can, maneuver themselves vertically and their wealth. I think it's hard to understand why so many people, they have that lifestyle inflation. If you make 50 grand, you make 80 grand. One person versus the other in America on average is probably going to have the same amount of savings. It's actually really sad, because when you just make more, you end up spending more here. I don't know why. It's like 80-20 regarding like people who live paycheck to don't. And it's like, well, that's just not That's not good.
Yeah, it's sad. And I mean, a lot of that comes down to I think just being able to being able to put prioritize the future and basically delayed gratification. And I think a lot of that comes down to learning that from a young age. I know Casey that you had on recently did a video recently talking about how his parents would pay him certain amounts for different chores.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, further incentivize things like cleaning your room so that you get to keep more of it. Basically trying to teach the lesson of, even understanding like how taxation works. And I think little things like that are really great for kids growing up and learning, that type of mentality. And then with me, it was like, I don't know, as a kid, I've always been super risk averse and very focused on saving. And I don't know what it is. It's a personality thing, because I know one of the jokes was my brother, who's 4 years younger, is like the polar opposite. He's an extreme go-getter, and he just jumps at things. And it's a great explanation of how how both personality types are really effective if you know how to use them. The classic story with that is when I was a kid, I remember we were going to this place where there was like a high dive into the pool. And like me, I'm, constantly like, oh man, I gotta, what's going to happen when I do this? I gotta watch, I gotta see, and have an idea of what the end result is. But then my brother just is immediately like run and jump off. And I think that's really important, because you gotta be risk averse enough to like know when things are, going to be worth it and when they aren't. But at the same time, if you don't have a balance of that and don't run and jump at things, then you just stay in the same place. So both are important.
Yeah, I think that's really true. There's a component in everyone's personalities where, I think there's like a kind of a mix actually between obviously people's natural personality, but there's a big component regarding parenting and like whether kids are receptive to the parenting or not. Because I know, I'm not like a psychologist or anything. I've read that parents and the way they parent their kids has a differing effect on the children because of their personality. Like some kids will be like, all right, my parents say this, I want to do this. Other will be like, I'm kind of sick of hearing what my parent has to say. I'm going to not do what they say or not care what they say. So I always think it's interesting to find out, one kid has this exact same opinion as the parents, one has a completely different opinion as the parents, and that's always pretty funny to see. But there seems to be an overarching issue in the country where it's like, I guess most parents are just not caring about the money they spend, and then the kids end up doing it. I don't know how that happened. Consumer culture here is weird.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I think it kind of ties in though to the 4-year versus going straight to a community college. It's that, it's the same old keeping up with the Joneses. Like we want to posture and show that we have, social worth. And I think that's a lot of it, because I know, it's like when you were in, like we're slightly different ages, but when you were in school, you remember if you didn't wear like whatever the it brands were when you were in even middle school,
Hollister,
which
man.
isn't, yeah, exactly. I was going to say Hollister and then Abercrombie before that,
yeah.
but it's like, if you didn't wear that, then you were different. And then the thing is, it's like, that's not even your doing. Like, you're not even paying for it, yet people still care. So it's like, I think normalizing, trying to get away from that and trying to normalize, like, I know, like Graham Stephan is a good example of that, where he does, constantly talks about like 20-cent iced coffee and, about buying, H&M shirts as opposed to designer when he can clearly, afford whichever he wants. It's like, that's, I think, an important thing to normalize in society, because everyone's always trying to, flex on each other.
Hard flex.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm very, I might be too far in the other direction, because like, when I was looking to get a car, I first moved out here, I moved to California. I'd been driving an old Jeep the entire time I was in school, and I was like, I'm gonna get a convertible because it's it's so great out here. I want to enjoy it. I want to reward myself because I graduated with a good amount of savings and everything. And then I ended up talking myself down to buying like an Elantra.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
so, it all just depends, but it depends on what people prioritize.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is it's very important. And then also, I think people just don't realize how much it takes to retire, and they don't think about it from that perspective. And when you realize how easy it is to save, like you were saying about people, whether they make 40 or 50K a year versus 80K a year, generally speaking, they save about the same amount. Like in the United States, if you're able to get out of debt early and make over 40K a year, just with a Roth IRA, just with putting like 6,000-7,000 a year in a Roth IRA, you're going to be a millionaire by the time you retire.
Exactly. That's
and
so
people
true.
and people don't think of it from that perspective, and I think that's part of it. It's
a very short-term thinking thing. I know Graham talks a lot about the whole like put $5 a day into an index fund, 7% return from the S&P 500, and then like you retire with $1.3 million, and people are like, that's stupid, that's not true. And I'm like, no, like the math works, buddy. Like when people do that, because
right.
what's 5 times 365 is like what, a little over $3,500 in the stock market every year. So I don't know, a little like about $4,000 in the stock market every year. Like that's not a crazy amount of your income. Like post tax is probably like 18-20% of your income. Like 20% of your income went into something that's going to give you more money. Oh no, like,
exactly.
I don't. It's just probably a lack of financial education, because we talked about this a little bit, but high schools don't teach you any of this stuff. Like high schools don't teach you anything. I'm not going to be rude to the entirety of the American school system right now, but like you really don't teach as much. Like just to be blunt, like I know all these facts about history, which apparently is being changed over time because historians find out new things. By the way, just a little mention there. But like they don't teach personal finance unless you specifically take a personal finance class, which end up being taken mostly by the kids that end up going to JUCO, which I actually noticed. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, in my high school, which I'm not necessarily representative of every high school, but I know with my high school, generally speaking, the business classes is what they were called. Yeah, they generally weren't taken by people that were going to college, because because the problem is that you're given, there's so many different required courses, and then outside of those required courses, if say I'm going to school for engineering or whatever I'm going to school for, I want to prioritize taking a lot of more quote unquote academic courses.
Yeah, of course.
That are more matter more in my major. So like I'd be focusing on taking like calcs and statistics and things like that, when what matters to most people is going to be basic personal finance, which I think that's another issue, is like whenever people talk about what to make core curriculums, and there's always the pushback of like whether people should learn algebra 2 or depending on what what politicians in that area are trying to get to happen. But it's like, I think most people would benefit a lot if we had like basic statistics, and that of course leads into understanding like compound interest and how different models work, which then goes right into personal finance. Mm-hmm. And I'm not proposing a solution, but I think that either putting a little bit of that into a statistics focused course, or putting that into a when you learn civics, and some schools call it civics and economics, that basic history course, maybe put a little bit more into the how to save for retirement. Because
I agree.
Yeah, because I think, like you said, it's a lack of understanding of math. I mean, I think it's the same reason that people, as an example, I will never buy a lottery ticket just on principle, because I know that it makes no sense mathematically.
Yeah, mathematically, there's a name for it's the something tax. I don't want to call people the name. It's the something tax. Right. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Look up the nickname for the lottery.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I was going to refrain. Yeah. It is, and it is. I mean, like, and the same with compound interest. It's like people just don't understand, because it's not something. It's similar to the, the situation that we've had recently with exponential graphs. Like people don't,
Oh my God.
think that. People don't think that way. We think linearly, generally speaking, and most things are not linear, especially compound interest. It's, people don't
get
so
that
it's hard for people to wrap their
they don't get that it's
around.
gonna just absolutely go on top of each other over and over again until the gains. I mean, I even had a guy, one of my friends from college, who started to take, he's in pre-med, right? And he started to take a finance class because he's switching to get his MBA, and he was like learning about compound interest while he was in his finance class as his senior in college. And I was like, yeah, it's like crazy, right? Because I mean, I had been introduced to this when I was younger, just by virtue of the person who raised me, does that for a living. And it's like, I feel very fortunate to know these things because, we got a senior in college who's an educated guy who didn't know how crazy compound interest is. And, you said you won't propose a solution to the American school system. I'm not exactly doing that, but I do have an idea. All right. So hear me out.
Yeah, for sure.
In Illinois, we're like the last state, or one of the last few, to force kids to take PE/gym, whatever you want to call it. And we're the fattest state, or like one of the fattest states. So it's like, if Illinois just switched that to requiring us to take personal finance and also took out the calculus requirement and put in a basic statistics one, people would understand things more. So people would understand things more. They wouldn't get convinced things so easy regarding like charts that are very, I mean, some media outlets have very, I don't know what to call them, but they're bad charts. Okay. They're bad charts. They're very misleading charts.
Yes.
And we joke about this in college when we're taking statistic courses, but I just think if you gave them a personal finance class and gave them a basic statistics class, so many people would have a better understanding of life and they wouldn't be convinced of things that aren't true. And on top of that, they'd save their dang money and they wouldn't be eating cat food when they're retiring, because that happens to people. And that's sad because we live in the most opportunistic, and we have the most opportunity in America. And it's like, how are people not knowing these things? Because 60% of people don't have a plan for retirement in America. What?
Yeah. No, and I actually, when you mentioned PE, that was my initial thought. I was like, well, PE would be the obvious one that you'd immediately say, let's swap this out, because the health part of PE, of course, is very important for people to understand. But you're also required to take biology. It's pretty easy to learn that stuff in between. And the reality is that if you running the mile in PE is not going to make you enjoy running.
No, it's not.
That's a completely separate group of people.
It's completely not. I have a firm belief, and if any of these people, or if anybody in the education system ends up seeing this down the road, my thing is this: people will seek out what they wish to. So it's like, oh, you're going to take away calculus from kids. Okay, last time I checked, a quarter of the school ends up taking music classes because there's a thing called electives. A lot of schools I'm aware of have the opportunity to take summer school so that you can take classes that you want to during the year. Or we had something called a 0 hour, so you'd take gym or another like regular class before school started. And my thought is this: like, kids are going to seek that out. If they want to take calculus because they want to be an engineer, let them do it. It's called make it elective, because last time I checked, the percentage of engineers in America is not that large. It's not everybody. It is not everybody. So why are we making everyone take a very one? It's like, oh, well, we want to introduce them to it. Okay, well, I mean, even some parts of algebra too. Like I had to know matrix algebra very well for engineering. Of course, yeah.
But most people, they would be better off understanding like why correlation doesn't equal causation. Like just basic statistics would be a lot more important than even geometry for most people.
Yeah, I remember learning matrices in high school, and I was like, all right, this is the perfect example of why are we needing to learn this. When kids say that, up until you reach like sophomore year of high school, like, no, stop. Like, you need to learn this because it's basic education. But like sophomore, junior years of high school, you start getting into some gray areas that they need to refine, I think, because if we're going to keep having generations of people not understanding statistics, people are going to start getting convinced of very misleading things. If you want them to, the more money somebody has, the more they can throw these things in your face. And I just don't want a country to not understand basic graphs that are like showing a 4 or 5% difference, yet it's like this on the
Yes,
graph. You
exactly.
know what I'm saying? I hate that. I'm not going to name the outlet, but you know which news outlet you are.
Right.
I'm sure you do too.
Yes.
There's like literally the memes of these from my graduate level statistics class were all from like the same news outlet.
Really? Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And it's not something, it's not something that's new, but it's like the more data becomes important in society, which obviously the more, access to the internet and being able to connect with everyone allows companies to track data, and the more data that they have, the more arguments they can make with that data. And so it's important that we are armed with the ability to understand what claims are being made and whether or not there's actual evidence to back up that claim.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it ends up shaping policy, and it ends up, shaping the way, like the decisions that people make. And yeah, it's a big issue, especially when it comes to things like, recently, like whether it's, the obvious issue that's been going on, or like elections, or, any, pick like, police, like police issues, any of those. People can, if you take certain statistics, you can make an argument that favors your side. And so it's very important to understand how those how those statistics fit logically into that equation.
Yeah, I think that's really important to look at, and I totally agree with you on everything that's been going on. There have been both sides kind of doing this thing where they throw it in front of your face, and there's actually been another thing I've been interested. I don't know if you're interested in this either, but I think we maybe should introduce a basic like logic class in high school. And my thought behind this is, we have these arguments being made for a lot of different topics always in politics, in society, regarding different changes that need to be made. But I don't know if you're familiar with like, arguments from authority and arguments from feeling. Like I'm not like ever trying to like knock down people's feelings, but like when someone says, how dare you say that to me and all that kind of stuff, the best people who are able to make arguments for their own points are able to like look through the arguments from authority and look through the arguments of feeling, and just go like straight to the facts and be like, yeah, but what does that mean? And I think if more people in our country thought like that, they'd be able to think for themselves a little more than they might be able to. Because people are getting quoted all the time as saying different things. And yes, do people have authority in certain cases? Yeah, sure. Do celebrities have as much authority though as people who have studied the statistics and the actual facts that make up situations going on? Not really. But yet people are so easily convinced by authority, yet they either take in the wrong statistics or they don't take in statistics at all, which has been kind of an issue as of late. And honestly, probably for the past, I don't want to say ever, but probably for a long time.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's been for a long time. I think the big difference is that, humans haven't changed that much. Realistically, in the last several hundred years, our individual desires and like why we make choices and how we're convinced of things hasn't really changed. It's just technology has made it more obvious because we have all these examples instead of just having anecdotal evidence, which is what most people would have had in, say, the 1950s or 60s or even 70s, because they couldn't just look up something on their phone. And I think, it's important. Also, when you're saying arguments from authority, especially whether it's celebrities or politicians or even people that are in that field, just because a person is, say I'm an engineer, that doesn't mean that I understand and can speak on like how a specific, bridge works. I'm an engineer. That doesn't mean that even if I were a civil engineer, that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily qualified. It's more important to look at what my argument is and whether that argument checks out. So I think basic logic is definitely really important. I don't know where you would my thought would be that you would put that into, say, English. Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was put it in an English course where you go over different like topics or issues and have to write argumentative papers.
Less Great Gatsby, more logic.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, because it's super important, and it's so, regardless of which it is, like whether it's appeal to authority, ad hominem, red herrings, like all these logical fallacies you see all the time used on actual news. You see it on social media, of course, and you see it in like quote unquote debates that are oftentimes more pro wrestling than actual discourse. And so, yeah, it's like it's very important to distill things down to what is being said as opposed to who is saying it or how they are saying it.
Yeah, there's a couple of funny situations that I'm aware of regarding, like you just said, all these red herrings and stuff. There was something interesting I found where there was a conversation being had, and you're watching this show and you don't realize that the same person that produces that show also produces Jerry Springer. There was like a panel on a serious social issue, right? And this argument happens and people are saying these things back and forth to each other. Then I find out like this guy who produced it produced Jerry Springer, and I'm like, oh, all right, so this didn't really have much value to me, did it? And another thing I was thinking of was regarding like the argument of authority. Someone was asked whether they had a PhD in a certain topic, right? And he's like, no, I don't have a PhD in that topic. And they go, well, then you must not be that knowledgeable about it. And he's like, well, like, I don't know that being a PhD directly makes you knowledgeable in the thing you're trying to say. Like, just because I spent 7 years getting school for something doesn't mean that what I'm saying is wrong. Like, you got to look at my facts. Like, we got to look at my statistics and stuff. And I think that's kind of what we got out of that last little bit of the conversation. We talked a lot about why it's important to just know facts and know statistics. And I think a good segue to get into regarding getting manipulated a little bit, I guess, kind of would be Drew obviously makes personal finance videos. I make personal finance videos sometimes, more self-development overall. He's got more of that specific component along with life success. There's like this weird trend right now, especially since the stimulus checks and everything. I mean, people are getting clickbaited left and right. I want to hear your opinion on, the clickbaitiness of YouTube right now.
Yeah, no, I mean everyone's trying to take advantage of that, and it's the biggest issue is, in my opinion at least, is every time you go on pretty much any personal finance video, the pre-ad roll you're going to get is going to be some guy holding a stack of probably fake $100 bills, saying he can teach you how to day trade. Yep. And because that's the thing, is like when people get that much money, or like, when people get money at one time in a lump sum like that, they automatically are like, oh, how do I, either make more of this or what do I buy with it? And they're looking at it from that get rich quick type of mentality, which is the real issue when it comes to like YouTube, in my opinion, which is why personal finance was so important to me, was that I can't stand seeing that. And it's been a thing, whether it was different compelling ads from, like here in my garage, or, 10X, you have all of these different people that are always trying to get you to believe everything that they say and to buy their courses. And it's a real issue. And that's why it's great that people like CoffeeZilla are out there. Guy. And yes, and Mike Winnett is another really good one that's a little smaller, but he does a great job of it. It's good that they're out there calling this stuff out, because there's a lot of vulnerable people, and especially, people that don't use the internet as much. They're not going to be as aware of all of these things. It's more a problem with, our parents. Yeah. And we see that all the time, but it's the same logic. And on YouTube, yeah, you have like, whether it's, I did a video recently on Dave Portnoy as an example. And so his isn't just on YouTube, it's more on Twitter, but it's the same thing. It's like, he's encouraging, it's very entertaining, but he's encouraging essentially gambling to an audience that is mostly 17 to 23-year-old boys. It's like, this is not a very healthy thing to do.
I am the target, man. I'm the target. I know. Exactly. I'm the target. I'm 22, and I tell you what, at this age, you're getting to a point where you start knowing more things, and you start thinking you know everything. So this is the time when fellow people of my age group, please, just from the bottom of my heart, know there are people who are trying to scam you. And just, even if you ask your parents for advice, I think that's good. You should do that. But also on top of that, scams are getting way more advanced than they're aware of. So like, just because they say it's probably fine doesn't mean it's fine. I'm saying like double, triple, quadruple check that whatever you're trying to get into is worth your money. Do crazy amount of review searching. Look, I don't care if you look up on YouTube whether someone's a scam or not. Do that sort of thing. I actually have been getting pretty happy with the fact that CoffeeZilla is blowing up when he is, because I've been watching him for like a year and a half. But since
same.
the situation started and everyone's at home, the algorithm caught him, and I was like, thank God. Because if you didn't blow up right now, there would be so many more people getting scammed out of their money. Even in the worst time in years for the economy, we'd have all these people being scammed. And it's not like a huge part of the population, don't get me wrong. But those people are so negatively affected that their life is ruined sometimes when these scams happen.
Oh, for sure. It's like, it's horrible. And again, that's why it's so important to have basic understanding of personal finance and generally like an understanding of how, to measure like whether something works, which is why statistics are important. Because, when you look at it as an example with day traders, right? Which when you're looking at day trading, it sounds great. And especially, again, our age group, you watch The Wolf of Wall Street, you watch The Big Short, and you think you know everything because you've taken finance. Dunning-Kruger effect kicks in, and you're just like, oh man, I'm going to make so much money. And even if you outperform the S&P, right? The reality is that if you're day trading all the time and you outperform the S&P, you have to more than double outperform the S&P just to make up the tax difference that you're going to end up giving away versus if you just bought and hold. So it's like Portnoy, as an example, was like talking about how he's all of a sudden on an upswing of like up 60% since since May. And it's like, dude, the market's up 30% since then.
Yeah, congratulations, buddy.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't mean anything. And you're in a higher tax bracket. You're in the highest tax bracket in the US. Like you're paying just 40% of that to income, just federal level, not even state level. So, okay.
Like,
anyone just buying S&P index funds has less stress and is keeping more.
Yeah, like when the market crashed and dipped at like, what was it, 18K? That was the worst day?
Yeah, that should be right.
Like what is that, like 28K now? I think it's
28, 29. I'm not sure about today, but yeah.
Okay, we got 10,000 more points on the Dow, but if anyone bought an index fund in like March and the reason was because of this. I've been hearing a lot of good information from people who know what they're talking about, who are like working in the finance industry, not people who are just saying it on the internet. But I don't have a problem with personal finance YouTubers. That wasn't a jab at them. That was a guru jab. Okay.
Understandable.
The thing is, the market is very much sentiment, right? And the sentiment was from the market that we were going to have insane unemployment. We're going to have insane contraction in our economic growth, right? We're just going to go backwards a lot. And they were like, it's like twice as the situation right now regarding deaths, actually. First of all, remember when they said it was going to be 2 million who died from the situation? It's like 200K. So it's 10 times better. We got situations where unemployment's way better than it was supposed to be. And the economy is in a better spot. So when people are saying like, why is the market going up yet our economy's not really doing so well? It's because it's not sentiment of the average person. Let me make that clear. It's the sentiment of the markets. And the sentiment of the markets was that we were going to go into the dark ages, and then we went into like a recession. So that's why it's going up, because it crashed. Because if everyone remembers, it crashed like 10,000 points almost in like a month. That's why it's up.
It was the fastest 30% drop in US history.
Yeah.
It dropped 30% in I think 22 days.
Yeah.
Like it's which is faster than it did in the Great Depression.
I was
like
freaking out. I was freaking out when that happened.
Yeah, and I mean everyone, generally speaking, was, and I think that's why you had such big drops. Is I think because you would watch and you'd see as an example, you'd see like on days when it would be very high down, generally speaking, everything would drop except for companies like Johnson & Johnson or 3M or these or Waste Management, basically what people call defensive plays. And it's like what's happening is funds are obviously selling out of those, buying into these less risky assets. And then you probably have a bunch of people that are closer to retirement that were cashing out of 401ks, which is why everything was dropping.
Yeah.
It wasn't just travel.
Exactly.
You're looking like Walmart was dropping, and Walmart stands to benefit, relatively speaking, to the rest of the economy, because it's really the smaller mom and pop shops that are going to get hurt and not able to stave over that, gap. But and yeah, it's exactly what you said though. It's forward looking, and that's the thing.
It's like 3-5 months out, right, or something like that.
Ballpark.
Because
yeah,
they were predicting we were going to be closed. Everything was going to be closed until December. So then the second, or not even December, it was going to be till like, I don't know, next February, because, the summer, I don't know if we're going to be ready, but then the fall will happen, and then another, season of sickness will happen. So then they were like, oh, so we're going to be shut down for a year. That's what's going to happen. And then we're shut down for like 3 months. So yeah, the markets are up, guys. That's why, because everyone predicted a year, and then it was 3 months, and then maybe it'll happen again. But sentiment is everything. Don't think you can predict the market. I'm just saying that, but
exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's true. And then also you got to keep in mind that the Fed making unprecedented movements as far as rate cuts and stimulus, that makes a huge difference, because anytime you have interest rates go down, then what that means is that, of course, money is going to be cheaper to borrow. When money is cheaper to borrow, and when you're printing more money, then that means inflation is going to go up, which means the dollar value is going to go down. If the dollar value is going down, then what that means is that assets are actually going to go up in value relative to the dollar. So that's why, especially in a higher inflation time period, it's really important to be investing in assets that appreciate over time, because the dollar is going to keep dropping.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was thinking about this actually regarding the dollar dropping. When they were going to do another round of stimulus, I was like, I don't know how bad it would be for another round of, or a little bit more inflation, because conceptually with like college debt, like all that debt, it makes debt so much cheaper.
It makes debt cheaper. Yeah. So that's the part that stinks about this whole situation is that people that are not making enough to comfortably invest and are still trying to save money beforehand are going to get hurt disproportionately to people that have debt or people that are investing in assets that appreciate, because their money is going to be going down, because savings rates are going to be going down.
Exactly.
Talking about saving APRs are going to be going down. Checking accounts, savings accounts, those are going down.
Yeah.
While inflation is eating away more at that dollar than it would previously, but people that are able to leverage debt, i.e. already have good enough credit scores, or are in a good enough position where they can, it's going to help them, and it's going to help people that have assets. But the people that are the most in need of help, it's sadly, if they aren't able to take advantage of putting that money into some type of vehicle that's going to allow it to grow, it's a double-edged sword. That being said, you have to, I think it's very important that the Fed did that, and it helped a ton. But yeah, we'll see. We don't know. That's the thing. All of these moves the Fed has been doing are unprecedented. And so that's what really makes it hard to judge the market right now, is because we don't really know, because it hasn't happened before.
Yeah. And I think, I remember hearing, didn't the Fed issue a bunch of 50-year bonds?
Yes.
Recently too. I think that's probably going to help.
Yeah, it should. The Fed should help. The question is, what does it help?
Yeah.
It should raise asset values.
Yeah.
That's the main thing it should do. The issue is those asset values are raising while the dollar is going to be dropping even more. So then the question is, what's really going to be interesting for me is, because I look at it from a value investing standpoint, and I'm always looking at like what the price to earnings ratio is. It's going to be really interesting to see how that's going to be affected, because we already have the stock market at a very high historic PE value. What's going to happen when all of these stock prices have been elevated through quantitative easing, but earnings are down because of that 3-month plus, whatever consumer behaviors have changed since then? What's going to happen? Because that means the PE is going to go up even higher. And I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a really good test of whether how well quantitative easing works.
Yeah,
And
they're actually regarding you saying the saving habits have changed. Did you know that savings went up 30%?
awesome.
The average savings went up 30%. Everyone's
No,
just, yeah.
I did not. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I heard that yesterday. It's crazy. You know, that's unprecedented because
That
we
is.
have a lot of people. This is my hope because I'm trying to be realistic about this, right? Let's say we're at 78. I think it's like 78, 22% regarding people who spend their paycheck right when it comes in, sort of thing. I'm hoping that gets shifted to like 60-40. If we're going to be realistic, that's like the best we're going to get out of this consumer culture change-wise. And past that, I'm not really sure if it's actually good for the economy. Like, if we're going to be honest.
It's not, yeah.
So I don't really. I mean, I want the people in my family and the people I'm close to and the people I talk to and tell about it to obviously improve their lives and stuff. But if there's going to be people who want to live like that, I'm not going to tell them like, all right, live the way you want to live. But I think that's interesting that consumer habits have changed, and something to very much show how instant gratification is a killer is when it was at 18K or at 22K and people pulled out. Think about this conceptually. Everyone who was like, oh my God, my retirement fund, where are they now complaining about it? Because last time I checked, your retirement fund is exactly where it was.
Exactly.
Like,
it's
3 months, man. A lot can happen in 3 months, but it's not that long of a period of time. I didn't start this channel 3 months ago. Things have changed with the channel, as you can see. Like, a lot happens if you just write it out.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting, like if you look historically, you can see some really cool stuff. Like as an example, in the late 70s, when the market dropped really drastically because of the oil crisis, that was near a market bottom for like several decades. And right before that, the top was one of the highest that it had ever been at the time. If you had bought then at the top, right, and then you had sold at the very bottom in the 08-09 recession, you still would have made money.
What?
So like that's the thing is
nice.
And what's one thing that's really, really interesting is if you look at like the S&P adjusted for inflation, you get a better understanding of it, because if you look at the S&P graph, it's generally like, but it's going up,
down,
flat,
but
up. There will be these stark drops, long recoveries, but over time, it's always going up.
Yeah.
But then if you look at it relative to, the inflation, i.e., you're looking at it relative to, say, like gold or something that is a set value, you'll see that the market doesn't really go up that much from a intrinsic value. It goes up nominally, which means that it's better for you to be in the market than it is to be holding cash, which is something we all know because we're in an inflationary environment. But it's really important to understand, and it's vital to understand because, again, it goes back to the compound interest. When you're looking at it, it almost always makes sense. If you bought a stock or if you bought an index fund, you should hold it, generally speaking, until it's time for you to sell it when you're retiring.
Exactly.
But if you buy individual stocks, if a stock was a good deal at $50 and relative to its valuation, then if it's $30, you should be buying more of it. You shouldn't be selling it.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless something has changed. So you just need to. And then the other issue with 401ks is people not understanding risk tolerance. Because we had a long bull run. Like 11 years.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And stocks were way outperforming bonds. Tech was way outperforming S&P 500 even. But the problem is that a lot of people that are, say, 5-10 years from retirement right now, they were looking at that and were probably over leveraged in terms of way too much in stocks. And that's why they're panicking when that stuff happens, because the reality is the older you get, you need to be rebalancing your portfolio and assessing your risk tolerance so that a 10% drop or more doesn't make you panic and pull out of the market.
Yeah, not be able to retire without pulling out. Yeah.
Right, because the reality is that if you had a good, well-balanced, like 60-40 stocks and bonds, you would have lost you would have been down
30,
less at the time.
20-30%, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you would have been down less at the time and wouldn't have been as likely to want to sell, But human psychology is a very interesting part of looking at how the market works.
I think it's always funny how like when it's down like that, it's essentially on sale. People think about the way they buy a T-shirt different than the stock market, and like in '08, when that was at its worst, when it was probably towards it was in October. It was like October when it like hit 7,800 or whatever the heck that was, something ridiculously low. You buy an index fund then.
Oh yeah,
versus even the crash that happened a couple months ago. That's still an 11,000 difference versus the Dow.
Yeah. Oh, it's insane. Like I was buying, and like the other thing is, because this is a good point to make, is at that time a lot of people, like personal friends, were asking me about like, oh, when should I buy? Da 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 da. In like say mid to late March, right? They're asking. And because they're thinking that they are going to be able to time the market. The reality is nobody can time the market consistently. You're not going to be, the odds are so far against you, that is a fool's errand.
Yeah.
And what's in my opinion better and what I do is like say on March 11th, which was when we had our first big drop in a day, you should be already have an idea of, hey, this is a company that I think is a good value at this price and one that I want to get into for a long-term hold, and then buy, a percentage of however many you want. So if I want, say 20 shares of that total, like I have a lump sum, like a stimulus check that I want to invest. If I want 20 total shares and it drops, 5-10%, then I may buy 1/5 of that, buy 4 shares.
Yeah.
Then I'll hold that. If it drops the next time, it may go up, it may go down, whatever. But then the next time I see it have a good appreciable drop and it's below, far enough below what I think it's worth, then I buy a little bit more. And then that way you don't go like, because going all in is a very bad mentality for most people, because you like, say you bought like Amazon in last like September or October, right? And you bought Amazon at like 2,000. And right now Amazon I think is at like 2,700, right? So that would be a really good investment. But in November it was down at like 1,600, 1,700. If you would have, decided, oh no, I'm down too much and just sold out of there.
Wasted.
Yeah, you just missed out on all of that. The reality is Amazon hadn't changed fundamentally as a company. It was still, still had the same value.
It was all market sentiment, like we were talking about earlier. It's literally just what a bunch of people are like, maybe this is how it'll look in a little bit. It's all a bunch of predicting that's right, or that could be right or wrong.
Right. And I think the other issue with that is the savings habits of people, because that's, I think, what leads to that is that people, realistically, the goals with financial independence, and this is my personal opinion, is one, not, get rid of debt. Well, it depends on which order you want on whether emergency fund and debt, depending on the interest rate. But generally speaking, get rid of debt, set up an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months that you have in cash in case of something happening, and then it's start investing. And I think a lot of people skip that second step of the emergency fund.
It's huge.
And so they're investing with money that they will most likely need. And so that's why they, pull out when things get bad, because they don't have that cushion. And having that cushion and peace of mind is huge. Like to me, that's the number one thing that was so great about like working and everything in college, was that by working basically, a full-time job in college, I was always able to save. And because of that, I didn't stress things. I wasn't as worried. There's studies showing how people that are, one, in heavy debt and two, below the poverty line, how they're the difference in the way they think, and talking about like immediate needs, because it's like you're always turned on. You're always thinking about like, oh, am I going to be able to make this next paycheck? Am I going to be able to buy this thing that I need in the near future? Putting that, having that ability to set something aside and delay that gratification, it makes everything so much easier.
It really does. I think there's a situation a lot of people find themselves in.
And without
and one second, sorry, and this situation caused it to be fully exacerbated. Like, you have that 1 month of savings even, and then this situation goes, well, maybe I should have probably had 6 months, because that's actually what people recommend. And this is exactly why. If people had 6 months of expenses paid for or saved, across the board, across the country, we just have a bunch of people being like, dang it, I can't go outside.
Yeah. And that's how I've been. Like, I'm fortunate because of being in the tech industry. I'm able to work from home very easily.
Yeah.
So that helps even more so. But yeah, exactly. It's like, having that peace of mind is going to make way more of a difference than buying a nicer car, or than, eating poke versus making a sandwich at home. It's
really
going to make
man.
It's insane how much it does.
There was a post I saw on Instagram recently that was pretty funny. It's actually I think you probably watched my videos. It's the G Lifestyle. He's another small YouTuber I've seen in the community. He posted on Instagram saying something like, basically, the whole getting the car thing, you care, and you think other people care about what kind of car you have, but they don't. They just don't care. So don't do it. Pretty much. This is
exactly
what he kind of put in the post.
Exactly. Yeah. You should. Yeah. You should never. You shouldn't be buying, just like you shouldn't
Clothes.
be choosing just like you shouldn't be choosing a job or a college major based on what other people think.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be buying things based on what other people think.
Yeah.
It's that same mentality of wanting to, flex or to look a certain way. And yeah, it's definitely something that's important. And that's why one of the things that's good about, someone like Gary Vee is putting out one thing that he stresses that's really important is how important it is to understand who you are, like self-awareness, because that is what keeps, lifestyle creep or trying to keep up with the Joneses from happening.
Yeah, when you're in a spot where you're comfortable with who you are as a person, you don't end up spending money on things that would fill the void of like, well, if I had these shoes, someone would like me. If I had this shirt, someone would like me. If I had this car, someone would like me. Well, maybe people should do some more time doing free things like reflection, and possibly then, and only then, would they get to a spot where maybe they'd be spending less. And on top of that, sure, you could even spend some money on the reflection, but then probably in the long term, it's probably going to cost you less, because you're going to stop that compulsionary spending on random things that you think people want. Like, I can't tell you how many people I know. Obviously, at my age, it's a big thing for a guy to get a car that people think looks cool. And then the guys are like, oh, nice, cool car. And they kind of feed into it, which sucks, because I feel bad for those people. I'm like, man, they don't care about your car. They're just being nice. Like, yes, they think it's a cool car, but are they going to think any less of you if you got a new one or had I have a buddy, for example, I have a buddy who has a new car. I have a buddy who has a beat up old used car. Like, completely, I mean, he got that thing for like $500. All right. So like, I'm like, all right, this guy's got 200,000 miles on a car. The other one has nothing on a car. And I'm like, they're both my friends. I don't really care. Like, I just genuinely don't care. Like, I think it's funny. One has the old car, and I'm like, I want to ride in it, see if it like breaks down. And the new car, I'm like, eh. Like, actually, I think the old car is more entertaining. If we're being perfectly honest, that might just be me, but that's funny in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's like, he knows it, so we're just both laughing at it. Like, haha, I'm not gonna have a nice car for a while because I'm young and I don't need to get one. So that's entertaining.
Yeah, no, and it's also less stressful. You don't have to worry about anything happening to it.
His insurance on it's ridiculously low too.
Right.
It's ridiculous. When I found out how much car insurance was, I was like, oh, Mike, even if you get that cheap car, it's gonna be a lot of money. He's like, no, actually, it's ridiculously cheap because of it. I was like, my God, this is hilarious. You're just riding in a free car almost because of how cheap it is. So
yeah, and that's I can't remember exactly the quote, but yeah, it's like Warren Buffett has one about that where it's like all these Wall Street's the only place where people that drive there in a Rolls Royce to take advice from people that take the public transport.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
People know. And then Bezos, I remember an interview with him. They did like a documentary in like the late 90s maybe even early 2000s. And at one point, the documentarian is in the passenger seat, and he's asking like, "So you're worth, X amount, and so what's with the Honda?" Because he's driving like a mid 90s Honda.
Like,
Yeah, he's like, this is a perfectly fine car, and it's the same mentality as value investing or looking at buying a t-shirt on sale versus not. It's all the same exact mindset of buying things less than what they're worth and getting more value out of it. It's the same mentality, just, in everything.
Yeah.
And that also goes into why channels like yours that are more personal development are really important, because when you're talking about taking time to, reflect, to understand, better what you want, who you are, a lot of those personal development things like building discipline by waking up earlier in the morning, little things like that go a long way, and having that time alone with yourself makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think you watched the podcast with Casey, obviously, and we talked about falling down the right rabbit hole regarding content, and people can joke about that all they want, like, oh, haha, like you're watching that more, like you're not gonna live a better life. Well, I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but there seems to be a direct correlation between the type of content people consume and how often they consume the content, and then how often they take action with content. And I think a big thing for channels like ours and people I'm interviewing so far, it's been like, when you watch their content, people end up taking action from the content. Now, when I'm trying to think of an example. You know who Morgs
Logan
is?
Paul.
You know who Morgs is?
No, I don't.
He's this
Sorry.
big prank YouTuber, right?
Gotcha.
I'm taking
Logan Paul.
Yeah.
Same
Oh,
thing.
yeah. That's type of, yeah. I'm taking a lot of action watching Logan Paul. If I took action
Right.
from Logan Paul in, what was it, February of 2018, I don't think I'd be taking good action.
Right.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And with people who are in my niche's content, like Matt Diavella, big fanboy of his, I took a lot of action because of him, and my life's better because of it. Now, if you take action from other forms of content, I'm not saying sports are bad. You could play sports, but most of us aren't going to be professional athletes, and most people who are fans of sports aren't in shape. That's just statistically, like, people aren't in shape in general, and then it happens.
Right. It just works out.
Yeah, but it seems with this type of content, people end up doing something with it, or at least they don't really have to do a whole lot. They just say, "Oh, let me try that out." It's very good that I think when I'm trying to make my videos recently, it switched from like, do this is a good idea, to I tried this out. It's pretty cool. You should try it out too. And this whole niche has got this cool storytelling component to it, and I think that inspires people to try to improve their lives, and then through that, personal finance gets positively affected, and their happiness overall gets positively affected, because, as I'm sure you know, you're broke or you're in a situation where you're struggling for money, you're not as happy as if you're at least set. Money isn't correlated to happiness, but not having money is correlated to stress.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, it's so important to have that, because the reason that people, I think, do more so take action, even than, say, like someone that watches CNBC all day versus someone that watches a personal YouTuber, or someone that watches Tony Robbins versus watches like a, self-development person on YouTube, we're normal people, right? It's much easier to
relate,
look at us as and as an example, because we're not, they know it's not like, quote unquote, a show. We're not Jim Cramer talking about like, oh, this and this on this day, when he's not doing any of that. Like, if he was, he would not be on show, because it's usually wrong. But it's like, having that personal, connection with other people that are, in similar situations like ourselves, it makes a difference, in whether or not people take action.
Yeah, and when you see people like, I bring up Casey again, but he talked about getting out of $80,000 in debt in the amount of time he did, 2.5 years. That just doesn't happen to most people.
Yeah.
But he's just a dude. Like, he's just a guy. He works. He said he was getting paid like 20-something bucks an hour. He Ubered. He Airbnb beat his house when he was allowed to, before his HOA figured it out. Like, everyone can do that. Everyone can work. And even if you're making like 15, 20 an hour or less, if you went to college, by the way, hopefully you're making like in the 20s. Like, just as a self-belief thing to anyone watching this, in certain areas of the country, maybe that's more than others. I get that because of like rural areas, whatever. but you should be able to believe in yourself to try to push to make, in the 20 pluses. I mean, like that's like $40K a year. $20 is like $40K a year. Like post or pre-tax, yeah. So because 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year.
Yep.
Yeah, it's 40K. Dang, math, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. It's and the other thing to keep in mind there is that if you're someone that's is either not quite in college yet or is working through college, going out and getting, because $20 an hour is really good relative to the average person in the United States just for a straight up job. Mm-hmm. But when you're looking at like, oh, what do I want to work in? My suggestion to you is look into companies that have really good worker relations and that are very supportive of people going to school. Examples were my brother worked at like Discount Tire, which is also called America's Tire, different places in the country. There, I think I worked there too, and I think I made like $14 an hour starting. And then they had programs where they would help pay for your school if you stayed with them like a year or two or something like that. Cool. Same thing with UPS. I had friends that did the same at FedEx, at Coca-Cola. Looking for those types of jobs that are generally speaking more working class jobs. It's going to make a huge difference. And while it's not as convenient as working at a Starbucks or working at something that's right there at campus, it makes a huge difference. And that was something that was really good for me because it gave me the right mentality, because I was working at UPS, I was working in, an operations management environment. So I was very innately aware when we were going through like system engineering classes, talking about like supply chains and talking about how, measuring how like employees work within a system. I had that firsthand experience, and it made a huge difference in my choices as far as like career path long term.
Yeah, and I think it's actually been good. We're going longer than I thought, but it's a good combo.
No worries.
Yeah, we're going into an interesting topic here. I think it's kind of segueing itself into there. The concept of leveraging your time and leveraging your debt. So I know a lot of people, when you go to college, you're leveraging your debt. Essentially you're taking on debt, and eventually you'll make more money than you would have otherwise, and et cetera, et cetera. But properly leveraging debt is different than just leveraging it overall. So let me give the example of my friend who bought the cheap car. For example, he was working at a job on campus doing a lot of technician work. Basically, he learned how to be a handyman. Good for him. But the school was paying him $725. All right. Then the second he got the car and leveraged the proper use of money, he was able to go and work at a Meijer. He was working at a Meijer, and he made like I think he was making like $13, $14 an hour. And I'm like, he's making double of what he was off of a purchase. So we're not saying like buying things are bad. That's not what we're trying to get at. I think leveraging your money properly and leveraging your time properly is important, because with Drew bringing up the UPS thing, you might want to be a barista more than you want to work at the UPS. Hear me out. You don't want to be a barista. You don't want to be a barista in general. You probably don't want to be at UPS in general. Both of those things you don't want to be. One of those things ends up in a better spot. Is it an extra 15-minute drive? Oh, boo-hoo. Little things add up when you leverage your time properly and you leverage your money properly and you leverage debt properly. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'm guessing you get where I'm getting at with that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like that type. And I was thinking that as I was saying with the UPS thing is, having access to a car, huge, determinant, or public transportation, depending on the city or, area you're at, huge determinant of whether or not certain jobs are available to you. Mm-hmm. And so, absolutely. If, you're in a position where you can get something like your friend, where it's cheap, a very reasonable cost, it's going to better you long term, you absolutely should. And even if you're someone that is stuck in, or not necessarily stuck, but who is in a position at a company that is not exactly what you want, go online and actively look for companies with companies that help people, that help like with college, like companies that provide college aid to their workers. It'll make a huge, and it doesn't just have to be college, but generally speaking, if they're more likely to offer benefits, and they're more likely to also offer help for education, because they want to build people from within. And that's why, if you're going to pick between, generally speaking, like McDonald's or Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A,
Chick-fil-A
yep.
does a much better job of supporting their employees. So that is an example. It doesn't
Costco
have
or
to be
Walmart too, like Costco,
right.
Walmart, yeah.
Yes.
Costco.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because obviously, I was okay and enjoyed doing the manual labor jobs. However, that's obviously not for everyone. And it's just making the best of your situation and looking for how do I get from A to B, not just focused on, oh, what's a paycheck that's nearby and is easy. And so, yeah, it matters a lot.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of an extra time commitment, but I think a big probably point that we've been making the whole time is like a little more time you spend on doing things, a little more effort you put into things, some big payback can happen because obviously I mentioned with my friend with the car, it is infinitely different to have 30% of your paycheck get eaten away or 40% of your paycheck get eaten away from car payments versus my other buddy who is, like, I don't know, 5% of it, like 5-10%. It really adds up over time, but it's that one initial decision to be like, all right, I'm going to suck up the fact that this isn't a great car because it doesn't matter what my friends think. This is the move. When I'm 30, delayed the gratification, I'll have a decent car. Like, it's what you need to do because money compounds. The way finances work, it's just like early on you make the right choices, later on you cannot make the right choices, and it doesn't matter as much because you have a bunch of money sitting in an index fund or in the right stocks or getting compound interest, and it's fine. So the last thing I do want to talk about is the beer thing. We always talk about the beer thing on the show. What has the beer thing been good for you in life? What are the positives? Because I want it to be positive because the news and everyone's like, this sucks, but what's the positives for the beer thing for you right now?
Yeah, for sure. So it's been for me. So I work full time, and I'm able to work full time from home, which that part has been great. The other part that I'm very fortunate for that, at least. The other thing that's been great is that because I'm able to work from home, just saving on commute time, getting ready versus getting ready for home versus getting ready to go to work. I have been able to use that time to get myself better. And one of those ways is like just daily scheduling, because my job's really pretty flexible, so I can go in at different times depending on different days what I need to do. And so it's been very important that I have built like a new regimented schedule. And so now it's like I'm much better at getting up at 5 or 6 in the morning, getting to bed by 9 to 10 depending on the day, and that has helped a ton. It's made me much more focused, and it's allowed me to do a lot more of working on making my YouTube content better because I have more time, and that's been huge. And then it's been overall, it's been a good time to reflect and to spend more time on self-development, which has been really great because normally I think we all get a little bit into the rat race of things, and yeah, that's been a big positive.
I'm good. I'm so glad to hear that. I think a lot of people are benefiting from it in the right ways. For as many people who are maybe struggling to stay positive, I always just want to hear that because it is a rough time, and we're getting in the right direction though. I think we're moving towards the right spot with this, and summer is pretty much in the middle of it right now, and I'm happy that it's summer. It's nice out, and this was a nice conversation. So if you have anything else to say, I give you the floor before we end the show.
Yeah, only thing I'd say is if you guys are interested in personal finance or just career development, we talk about different things along the lines of getting a job out of college, getting a job out of high school, stuff that goes on within the engineering sphere, and just general personal finance topics. Be sure to check out my channel, and also don't forget to keep subscribed and watching Demetri's channel as well.
Well, I like both parts, but I like the last part. So, Drew, I really appreciate having you on the show. And with that being said, guys, I will see you guys in the next one.